Is what we did at the first part in Chi for the benefit of us all. Okay. Inti yamamu nyina akwaba. De na me kan say ene ye de say ye to nsa frɛ mo say mo mmra na dwumadi a ye nhwehwɛmu a ye fa ekwan a COVID-19 kwa say ni twidin ho. Ekwan a yare COVID-19 eba ye no ye wo ye businesses ekwan be na ye fa so share say ye businesses no engu say na ensunsu aso oben kra na COVID-19 no nya wo ye dwumadie ni so na ye nhwehwemu no ye sua ne ma bebre enti ye ka say ene no ye be hia wa ha na enema ye sua fi ye nhwehwemu no ye ne mo ba betena se na yadwen ho ne asuade afiri mu ahwe kwan ye befa so aboa yen ama ye business no etumpon enti yamamu nyina akwaba na saa dwumadie we no eye dwumaku a yefrɛ no Participatory Development Associates any Participatory Development Associates wo Ghana ha eye enkran ha ne Kumase na Overseas Development Institute eno wo amanone wo UK London na dwumadie na sane se beye yie no ye wo dwumako fufuro a ye frɛ no Mastercard Foundation omo no omo so boa yen ema yetimi yesa nhwehwɛmu yi enti ema mu nyina akwaba na edem maya akwaba no na wo ka se ho hia se ye behia na ya dwendwen semafa nhwehwɛmu na ye no ne adesua yesua because adesua de ho hia abribia na ho hia se ye besua de na sabre no edru afa ye beto nsa frɛ empenifu edi anim me ye nhwehwɛmu yi eye the researchers ye be from ama oma beka nhwehwɛmu no mo ye no ho nsɛm akyerɛ yen. So at this point we would want to go deep into the study. We want to have an overview of the study findings on navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, the experiences of female-led micro and small-scale enterprises in Ghana. And to do this, we have two people to help us do this. We have one person online and another is in person here. So here we have Alexander Afram. Alex, give us a wave. Okay. Inti amo yensama Alex. O company for mo ye nhwehwɛni mu na o mo be presentation atwɛn. Na face so ye wo ye maame ba koso so no wo online. So when COVID no ho ne ma ne bi no utimi tena fie kra na wo baabi foforo na ye ne wo di nkomo ne nyina aboa ye ame akɔ. Ewumu sɛ ensusanso ne bi ye bɔne ba papa ne bi ne sɛ baby a wo bia yetimi ni odi nkomo ya maami o join yen from Cape Coast ni din de doctor ewenam afinyo na oye ochurcheni anasa lecturer ewo Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management ewo University of Cape Coast. So I think she will be doing the presentation, so I would want to hand over to her to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Estelle. And I want to thank everyone for joining us both in person and virtually this morning. As has already been said, today we are here to have a conversation regarding how female-led micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises in Ghana navigated and are still navigating the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we go into the findings and the discussions, I would want to say a big thank you to the technical team that worked on this research and then the report. Thank you very much for your support, technical team. And this is going to be the outline of our presentation. We'll have a brief introduction and then a background to the study, Then we'll look at the research questions that guided the study. What questions did the study seek to find answers to? Then we'll look briefly at the methodology that we followed. Then we go into the findings, looking at the impact of the pandemic on female-led businesses, how they coped, how some made attempts to recover, how digital technologies aided their recovery efforts, what kind of support was available for these businesses during the pandemic, and then we finally look at what is the way forward. Now, two main subjects were of interest to this study. One was micro, small, and medium scale enterprises. And then the second was women-led businesses. Why these two? Our focus generally on micro, small, and middle enterprises was because of their importance in the economies of all countries, whether they are developed or developing countries. It has been widely acknowledged in the literature that these categories of provide or contribute significantly to the economies of countries, whether they are developed countries or developing countries. They contribute massively to employment, income generation, human resource development, business skills development, poverty reduction, economic growth, youth and women empowerment. And they form the core of businesses in all economies. And that is why in some contexts, this category of businesses have been described as the bloodline or the bloodline of the economies, because they hold the economy. Because majority of the businesses that you find in most economies are made up of these category of businesses. Equally, in Ghana, about 90% of the businesses that you find in the informal sector are micro, small, and medium, and they contribute about 80% of employment, or they create opportunities for about 80% of employment opportunities to be given. And then they also contribute about 70% of the country's gross domestic product. So we cannot have a conversation regarding COVID and we will not look at these businesses, because they are very important in our economic landscape. Now, another interesting thing about this category of businesses is that they are dominated by female entrepreneurs, women businesses. Now, what is unique about this landscape and why women are able to eat? This category of businesses have very low entry requirements and also require very low skills and very low capital as compared to the larger establishments. So it is easier for women who are already confronted with financial issues, women that have issues with skills, women that are already having issues with capacity, to easily enter into this space and start a business of their own. So MSMEs have provided a very good platform for women to be empowered, help reduce poverty and gender inequality, as well as dealing with unemployment issues relating to women. Very impressive figures exist on women starting business and then in Ghana. According to the 20 Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, it says that about 231 million women worldwide are running their own businesses. And the 2018 Mastercard Index of Women Entrepreneurship report also identified that in Ghana, about 46.4% of businesses are owned by women or by females. So we cannot have a conversation about COVID that has affected all facets of our lives without focusing on these two key groups, SMEs and women. Now, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has not only created problems for MSMEs, but it has also created problems for women generally. Now to the COVID, these MSMEs, even though they are very, very important in our economic landscape, have certain characteristics that makes them very vulnerable to risks this pandemic that we are being confronted with. Most of these businesses are new, they are small, they have less resources, they do not have the capacity to deal with crises of this nature. The little uncertainty in the environment distorts their operations. And secondly, women, unfortunately, dominated in the manufacturing sector, the retailing sector, are largely dominated by women, and these were the plight of micro, small, and medium enterprises. It has particularly put women-led businesses in a very precarious position. And that is why we were interested in finding out how did these women-led businesses within the micro, small, and medium enterprise landscape navigated or are still navigating the pandemic. Our study was guided by 6 main questions. The first was we're interested in finding answers to how the pandemic was affecting the livelihoods of females who owned these micro, small, and medium businesses in the informal economy of Ghana. We were also interested in how they coped. What kind of coping strategies did they employ when the pandemic struck? Then what role did digital solutions play in their quest to what extent did it help them navigate the pandemic as compared to their male counterparts in these same businesses? And finally, what lessons have been learned and how those lessons guide them in their attempt to help their businesses recover from the pandemic and become resilient to this pandemic and other that may emerge in the future. So this was the methodology that we followed in our quest to find answers in this study. So to have a true representation of all the businesses in terms of geographic spacing, we purposively looked at 3 regions. The Ashanti region representing the middle belt of the country, the Greater Accra region representing the coastal belt of the country, and then the northern region representing the northern sector of the country. Because our focus was on experiences of women-led or female-led businesses, the study adopted a qualitative approach, which provided us with a more appropriate framework for these experiences to be explored and understood. So the study was purely qualitative in nature, and we employed in-depth interviews and focus group discussions, as well as key informant interviews in soliciting data for the study. Now, two categories of participants were engaged in this study. We had youth forward and non-youth forward beneficiaries. Now, the youth forward was the youth forward beneficiaries were part of an earlier program that was implemented. And we chose these two groups of people because the YF group had experienced some intervention. And then we had people who had not experienced any intervention, so that we could see how different experiences and exposures played in the pandemic. We focused on diverse sectors of the economy: agribusiness, petty trading, construction, fintech, information technology, and those that belong to the skilled labor sector: hairdressing, dressmaking, carpentry, mechanics, among others. We did not only interview females, we also, even though the study mainly was focusing on females, we also interviewed some males to use that as a control group and compare our findings against whatever responses we'll get from the males. So in each of the regions that we went into, we selected an urban district that had a very high commercial activity, and then we also chose a rural district. So in the Ashanti region, the Kumasi Metro was selected as an urban area or center, and then New Edubiasi was also selected as a rural metro for urban, and Ningo Pram for rural. And in the northern region, Tamale Metro for urban and Kumbungu for rural. Now, in each of the regions, at least 4 focus group discussions were conducted, and we focused on 3 age cohorts. We had the youth that were within 18 and 35 years, and then we had the adults that were 36 years and above. We had the adult youth, and then we had the adults who were 36 years and above for both males and females. So we had FGDs conducted for both males and then females. Then we had 2 key informant interviews that were also conducted in each district selected. And the key informants were either NGOs, local government authorities. Finally, especially in the urban areas, there was this heightened fear of contracting the virus. So people were not willing to go out and then patronize certain goods and services. So that led to a reduction in the demand for these goods and services. And that is highlighted in one of the quotes from a decorator that was in the Ashanti region, as well as a picture from the northern part of the country, where the lady basically opens her shop, hoping that customers would come in, but that rarely happened for her. Aside a reduction in the demand for goods and services, which actually contributed to a lot of the businesses experiencing a reduction in their income stream, they were forced to turn to their savings and business capital to survive. Now, this happened because for majority of the businesses, over 90% of the businesses surveyed or participants interviewed, the businesses that they were engaged in was their main or their sole source of income. So once the pandemic had affected it, they did not have any other source of income. So they were forced to depend on their savings. And where savings were spent, people went further to make use of their business capital. So by the time the first and second waves of the pandemic were coming to an end in Ghana, people's business savings and business capitals were already spent up on personal usage. It was not channeled into the businesses, but people had to still cater for their personal needs and that of their families. So savings and business capitals were channeled into that. And also, almost all businesses reported that there was a disruption in the supply chain. So, and it had some consequent issues for them that they had to deal with. Now, during the pandemic, there were lockdowns, borders were closed, and it affected the global as well as the domestic supply chain. Businesses that were directly and indirectly dependent on imports or imported goods especially suffered with a disruption in this supply chain. A number of the businesses in the urban centers reported that because they could not have access to goods because the borders were closed and goods were not coming in, they ran out of stock and did not have things to sell. Even where stock was available, there were price hikes because a situation of scarcity had been created because of the closure of the borders. So those who even had stock to even supply increased the prices of their products. So for most of the businesses in the urban centers, those who could not deal with or afford to buy products at such exorbitant prices chose to close down their shops temporarily until the issues became better. But in the rural areas, the opposite of what those businesses in the urban areas were experiencing was observed in the rural areas. Now, in the rural areas, when farming activities dominated, most of the women that were into agribusinesses or farm enterprises reported that they could not find markets for their products. So they were producing all right, but because their main clients were in the urban areas and there were restrictions on movement, suppliers and customers could not meet. And so for many of these people in the rural areas, they were forced, because they were dealing in perishables, they were forced to sell their produce locally at very low prices to avoid spoilage of their products. The main three